of the ice cap is admitted by most of the geologists who have specially studied the glacial age. The Russian Geological Survey already has taken this view as regards Russia, and most German specialists maintain it as regards Germany. The glaciation of most of the central plateau of France will not fail to be recognized by the French geologists when they pay more attention to the glacial deposits altogether. Close footnote. Lakes filled all depressions of the valleys before their waters dug out those permanent channels which during a subsequent epoch became our rivers, and wherever we explore in Europe, Asia or America, the shores of the literally numberless lakes of that period, whose proper name would be the lacustrine period, we find traces of Neolithic men. They are so numerous that we can only wonder at the relative density of population at that time. The stations of Neolithic men closely follow each other on the terraces which now mark the shores of the old lakes, and at each of those stations stone implements appear in such numbers that no doubt is possible as to the length of time during which they were inhabited by rather numerous tribes. Whole workshops of flint implements testifying of the numbers of workers who used to come together have been discovered by the archaeologists. Traces of a more advanced period, already characterized by the use of some pottery, are found in the shell heaps of Denmark. They appear, as is well known, in the shape of heaps from 5 to 10 feet thick, from 100 to 200 feet wide, and 1000 feet or more in length, and they are so common along some parts of the sea-coast that for a long time they were considered as natural growths, and yet they contain nothing but what has been in some way or other subservient to the use of man, and they are so densely stuffed with products of human industry that during a 2 days stay at Milgard, Lubbock dug out no less than 191 pieces of stone implements and 4 fragments of pottery. Open footnote. Prehistoric Times, pages 232 and 242. Close footnote. The very size and extension of the shell heaps prove that for generations and generations the coast of Denmark were inhabited by hundreds of small tribes, which certainly lived as peacefully together as the Fuegian tribes, which also accumulate like shell heaps, are living in our own times. As to the lake dwellings of Switzerland, which represent a still further advance in civilization, they yield still better evidence of life and work in societies. It is known that even during the Stone Age, the shores of the Swiss lakes were dotted with a succession of villages, each of which consisted of several huts, and was built upon a platform supported by numberless pillars in the lake. No less than 24, mostly Stone Age villages were discovered along the shores of Lake Leman, 32 in the Lake of Constance, 46 in the Lake of Neuchâtel, and so on, and each of them testifies to the immense amount of labor which was spent in common by the tribe, not by the family. It has even been asserted that the life of the lake dwellers must have been remarkably free of warfare, and so it probably was, especially if we refer to the life of those primitive folk who live until the present time in similar villages built upon pillars on the sea-coast. It is thus seen, even from the above rapid hints, that our knowledge of primitive men is not so scant after all, and that so far as it goes, it is rather opposed than favourable to the Hobbesian speculations. Moreover, it may be supplemented to a great extent by the direct observation of such primitive tribes as now stand on the same level of civilization as the inhabitants of Europe stood in prehistoric times. That these primitive tribes which we find now are not degenerated specimens of mankind who formerly knew a higher civilization, as it has occasionally been maintained, has sufficiently been proved by Edwin Taylor and Lubbock. However, to the arguments already opposed to the degeneration theory, the following may be added. Save a few tribes clustering in the less accessible highlands, the savages represent a girdle which encircles the more or less civilized nations, and they occupy the extremities of our continents, most of which have retained still or recently were bearing an early post-glacial character. Such are the Eskimos and their congeners in Greenland, Arctic America, and northern Siberia, and in the southern hemisphere the Australians, the Papuas, the Fuegians, and partly the Bushmen, while within the civilized area, like primitive folk, are only found in the Himalayas, the highlands of Australasia, and the plateaus of Brazil. Now it must be borne in mind that the glacial age did not come to an end at once over the whole surface of the earth. It still continues in Greenland. Therefore, at a time when the littoral regions of the Indian Ocean, the Mediterranean, or the Gulf of Mexico already enjoyed a warmer climate and became the seats of higher civilizations, immense territories in Middle Europe, Siberia, and Northern America, as well as in Patagonia, Southern Africa, and Southern Australasia, remained in early post-glacial conditions which rendered them inaccessible to the civilized nations of the torrid and subtorrid zones. They were at that time what the terrible hermits of northwest Siberia are now, and their population, inaccessible to and untouched by civilization, retained the characters of early post-glacial men. Later on, when desiccation rendered these territories more suitable for agriculture, they were peopled with more civilized immigrants, and while part of their previous inhabitants were assimilated by the new settlers, another part migrated further and settled where we find them. The territories they inhabit now are still or recently were subglacial as to their physical features. Their arts and implements are those of the Neolithic age, and notwithstanding their racial differences and the distances which separate them, their modes of life and social institutions bear a striking likeness, so we cannot but consider them as fragments of the early post-glacial population of the now civilized area. The first thing which strikes us as soon as we begin studying primitive folk is the complexity of the organization of marriage relations under which they are living. With most of them, the family, in the sense we attribute to it, is hardly found in its germs. But they are by no means loose aggregations of men and women coming in a disorderly manner together in conformity with their momentary caprices. All of them are under a certain organization which has been described by Morgan in its general aspects as the Gentile or clan organization. Bachofen, Das Mutterrecht, Stuttgart, 1861. Lewis H. Morgan, Ancient Society, or Researchers in the Lines of Human Progress from Savagery through Barbarism to Civilization, New York, 1877. G. F. McLennan, Studies in Ancient History, First Series, New Edition, 1886. Second Series, 1896. L. Fison and A. W. Howitt, Camillara and Cournay, Melbourne. These four writers, as has been very truly remarked by Giraud Telon, starting from different facts and different general ideas and following different methods, have come to the same conclusion. To Bachofen we owe the notion of the maternal family and the maternal succession; to Morgan the system of kinship, Malayan and Turanian, and a highly gifted sketch of the main phases of human evolution; to McLennan the law of exogeny; and to Fison and Howitt the quadro or scheme of the conjugal societies in Australia, all for end in establishing the same fact of the tribal origin of the family. When Bachofen first drew attention to the maternal family in his epoch-making work, and Morgan described the clan organization, both concurring to the almost general extension of these forms and maintaining that the marriage laws lie at the very basis of the consecutive steps of human evolution, they were accused of exaggeration. However, the most careful researchers prosecuted since by a phalanx of students of ancient law have proved that all races of mankind bear traces of having passed through similar stages of development of marriage laws, such as we now see in force among certain savages. See the works of Post, Dargun, Kovalevsky, Lubbock, and their numerous followers, Lippert, Nook, etc. To tell the matter as briefly as possible, there is little doubt that mankind has passed at its beginning through a stage which may be described as that of communal marriage, that is, the whole tribe had husbands and wives in common with but little regard to consanguinity. But it is also certain that some restrictions to that free intercourse were imposed at a very early period. Intermarriage was soon prohibited between the sons of one mother and her sisters, granddaughters, and aunts. Later on it was prohibited between the sons and daughters of the same mother, and further limitations did not fail to follow. The idea of a gens or clan, which embodied all presumed descendants from one stock (or rather all those who gathered in one group), was evolved, and marriage within the clan was entirely prohibited. It still remained communal, but the wife or the husband had to be taken from another clan. And when a gens became too numerous and subdivided into several gens, each of them was divided into classes (usually four), and marriage was permitted only between certain well-defined classes. That is the stage which we find now among the Kamilarwa-speaking Australians. As to the family, its first germs appeared amidst the clan organization. A woman who was captured in war from some other clan, and who formerly would have belonged to the whole gens, could be kept at a later period by the capturer under certain obligations towards the tribe. She may be taken by him to a separate hut after she had paid a certain tribute to the clan, and thus constitute within the gens a separate family, the appearance of which evidently was opening a quite new phase of civilization. Now, if we take into consideration that this complicated organization developed among men who stood at the lowest known degree of development, and that it maintained itself in societies knowing no kind of authority besides the authority of public opinion,